Next, on Currents News, the Diocese of Brooklyn is taking on the state to stop church restrictions from taking effect this weekend. We speak exclusively with the attorney who filed the lawsuit.
The hallways and classrooms of this Brooklyn Catholic Academy might be empty, but their students are still hard at work. I'm Emily Druby, and coming up, I will show you how online learning works.
And will all students and teachers in schools next to hotspots need to be tested weekly? Plus, the key takeaways from the first and only vice presidential debate. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. The Diocese of Brooklyn taking action tonight to keep all of its churches open for worship. A lawsuit is being filed against Governor Cuomo's new restrictions. Currents News' Jessica Easthope reports.
Catholics in the Brooklyn Diocese have changed the way they practice their faith in an effort to keep everyone safe and stop the spread of COVID-19. But now Governor Cuomo has said the precautions are not enough, leaving the diocese no other choice but to take legal action. The diocese has hired the firm Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher to file a lawsuit against the state, saying the new measures infringe on Catholics' First Amendment rights. Randy Mastro has taken on the case. He's one of the nation's top trial lawyers and former Mayor Rudy Giuliani's chief of staff. In a statement, he argues, quote, public officials have a sacred duty to do right by those they serve, but this is simply wrong and wrong-headed. If this latest executive order stands, parishioners won't be able to go to Mass this Sunday, even though the diocese has done everything right to ensure safe conditions in its churches. Thus, this religious community will be denied its most fundamental right, the free exercise of religion. And that is why we've gone to court to block this executive order from going into effect as applied to the diocese's churches. In the 22-page lawsuit filed Thursday, the diocese is seeking an injunction preventing the enforcement of the attendance limits in red and orange zones. Ahead of the filing, Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio said it's a matter of religious freedom.
We believe that our rights now are being infringed, especially First Amendment rights for worship, in an unfair way.
Like church communities in the diocese, Bishop DiMarzio expressed frustration over the new restrictions.
I felt disrespected.
On Tuesday, Governor Cuomo said the virus was starting at mass gatherings, like in houses of worship.
This is about mass gatherings. And one of the prime places of mass gatherings are houses of worship.
Bishop DiMarzio says churches have been taking every possible precaution. The governor's announcement was shocking to the bishop because none of the diocese's parishes have experienced a spike since reopening.
We believe that we still can be a safe harbor for people to worship without adding to the infection rates in those particular areas.
During the pandemic, Catholics fought for churches to be considered essential. This time around, Catholics feel like they are being unfairly targeted by the new restrictions. The lawsuit states, quote, the initiative is clearly untailored as applied to the diocese, given the starkly different consequences the order imposes on secular businesses, allowing, for instance, hundreds of people to shop at a grocery store, but limiting worship in a 1,200-seat church to a mere 10 parishioners. 9, including clergy. Bishop DiMarzio says the diocese will comply with all of the latest guidelines, but is hoping to receive a response to the lawsuit in the coming weeks. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
The Diocese of Brooklyn has been taking every safety precaution since churches reopened to make sure worshipers stay safe. When parishes opened their doors, only 25% were allowed inside, and those who returned were under strict social distancing. Everyone must also wear a face mask. The liturgy also changed because of COVID. No entrance procession for any mass. Music must be limited to the organist and cantor, and the cantor cannot sing at the same place where the lector reads. All reading materials, such as missals or worship aids, were removed from the pews. The handshake during the sign of peace strictly forbidden, and the Diocese of Brooklyn, after no longer offering the precious blood, strongly recommended that parishioners receive communion by hand only. Right now on the phone, the attorney who is filing this lawsuit on behalf of the diocese, Randy Mastro. And Randy, the lawsuit against Governor Cuomo is now filed. In legal terms, how is the governor exactly overstepping his authority here?
The First Amendment protects freedom of religious expression. There's no more fundamental expression of religion than being able to attend Mass, to be able to go to church, to your parishes and your churches, and celebrate communion together. For months now, in this diocese, there have been the safety precautions taken, every rule complied with, and there have been no outbreaks, no incidences of COVID. The diocese has gotten it right. So there's absolutely no basis, no legitimate reason for imposing stricter requirements on the Roman Catholic churches in these particular, what the governor calls, hot zones. It's not happening in the diocese churches and parishes. It's happening in other communities. There is no basis, that's what the governor says. There's no basis, therefore, under the First Amendment for such an intrusion on freedom of religion.
Yeah, so how can the governor allow certain gatherings, like protests, for example, but then say controlled gatherings where strict protocols are being followed are mass gatherings?
It's some of the distinctions that have been made are themselves irrational and point out that the line drawing that's been done here doesn't work, and it isn't fair, and it isn't constitutional. For example, in some of these so-called hot zones, non-essential businesses, other than in extreme cases, are going to be allowed to continue to function and welcome as many customers in their stores as they want. How does that make any sense? Our churches and parishes practicing all of the proper safety protocols implemented by a commission within the diocese headed by the former head of emergency management for the city, Joseph Esposito, and having seen those protocols working and complying with every mandate and every dictate, but still allowing people to congregate and enjoy the Sunday Mass, to now say, oh no, you're thrown in and you have to stop doing that. It's tragic. It's sad. It's harmful. And most of all, it's unconstitutional.
Right. So how soon can the diocese and parishioners expect the court to respond to this complaint?
Well, we hope to be before a judge tomorrow, seeking a temporary restraining order so that Mass can go forward on Sunday. And, we remain very hopeful that we will be heard tomorrow and that there will be relief from the governor's latest executive order.
How confident are you that the courts will rule in the diocese's favor?
I'm confident in how the court will rule because the case law is so clear. And there have been so many cases that have established that the government cannot go this far and cannot invade the free exercise of religion without any legitimate reason, let alone a compelling one, which is what is constitutionally required.
All right, Attorney Randy Mastro, thanks for the update.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
As Mr. Mastro said, similar religious liberty lawsuits challenging COVID-19 restrictions have been filed across the United States. Here's a few of them. In Southern California, a Catholic priest sued Governor Gavin Newsom, saying the restrictions interfere with Catholic worship. There were many filed this year against Newsom. In July, 3 California churches sued the governor, seeking to overturn his ban on singing during services. In Minnesota, a lawsuit was filed against the governor there, challenging 6-foot mandates. In D.C., a Baptist church and more than 30 U.S. senators filed a lawsuit against the mayor over mass gathering restrictions. And in New York City, both Orthodox Jews and Catholics sued the mayor and the governor for selective enforcement of mass gatherings at the height of racial justice protests. The federal court there ruled that it is wrong to limit religious services, yet condone protests. The sudden switch to remote learning, while not wanted, is going smoothly for Catholic schools in the hot zones. Currents News' Emily Druby visited Our Lady of Grace in Gravesend and shows us how it's working.
Good morning, everyone.
Stephanie Campanella energetically greets her first class of the day over Zoom.
So let's break down this question.
Teaching her math and science students online who, for about a month, were right here in her classroom. That changed quickly on Monday with this announcement.
We're going to close the schools in those areas tomorrow.
Stephanie's school, Our Lady of Grace Catholic Academy in Gravesend, Brooklyn, shut down for being in a COVID hotspot, switching to remote learning with less than 24 hours notice.
Okay, we all have our notebooks?
Stephanie says the new school day looks very similar to the old, especially since they still have live classes.
Honestly, it's as if we were still in the building. There is a lot more work that goes with it because you have to make sure that you find all the different videos, extra videos.
The technology for these classes has improved so much since the first time they were forced shut back in March. For example, this camera creates a much clearer picture of the teacher, while this camera allows them to project written images onto their Zoom.
We try to keep our enthusiasm level as much as we can, as if the students were in class. We play different games with them on Zoom.
On Thursday, that included an escape the room themed game.
So they have to answer the questions.
Problem solving made fun.
We got to do teams, so it was really fun. We were competing. It makes it more interactive than just sitting and doing assignments.
Our Lady of Grace is one of 10 Catholic schools in the red and orange zones forced to close with the new COVID restrictions. The over 2,700 kids affected have had to switch to an online learning model.
Into an improper fraction.
It's a lot of extra work, but Stephanie says she's happy to do it, adding the only real challenge has been seeing her students sad to be home.
We were all so excited to be back. I mean, just to see the students' smiles.
She also felt bad for parents that had less than a day to find childcare. Parents are still paying tuition during this time. It's not yet clear how long the school will have to remain closed, but we do know that it will be 14 days minimum. In Gravesend, Brooklyn, Emily Druby, Currents News.
Schools in the Diocese of Brooklyn started preparing to open back in June, and all the academies passed inspections conducted by New York City health officials. All of the schools require students to wear masks all day throughout the school building. Desks are set up 6 feet apart. Signage promoting hygiene, illness, mask, and distance requirements cover the buildings. There are daily health screenings of everyone who enters the building in line with state guidelines. Procedures are in place if a positive case is detected or suspected. And finally, each school is cleaned on a daily basis using CDC-approved sanitizers and disinfectants. Weekly testing of all public schools in the yellow zone will start Friday. It's not clear yet if private schools will be included in that measure. There are more than 30 Catholic academies in the yellow zone.
I want to make very, very clear, all staff, all students, we need full participation. It is a requirement of being part of the in-person school community.
The mayor says all test results will be sent to parents and schools within 48 hours. Parents can sign their child's consent forms at schools.nyc.gov/COVID testing. And to see if you are currently in one of the cluster zones, go to nyc.gov/COVID zone. There you can enter your zip code and readily have that information. There's a lot more news headed your way. Breaking down the debate, how did the vice presidential candidates do in their first and only face-off? And the next presidential debate is rescheduled so that it doesn't have to be virtual. Plus, some are calling it a miracle. A statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe is found years after it was swept away in a storm.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/sendus and you may see your submission on Currents News.
It was the vice presidential candidate's turn to take the stage for a debate, the first and only one between the two. Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Kamala Harris took extra social distancing precautions last night. They were mostly polite, but still critical of the other's policies.
Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country.
Right from the start, questions on COVID-19, a huge issue of this campaign highlighted by the plexiglass partition on the debate stage. Vice President Mike Pence responded to Senator Kamala Harris by echoing President Donald Trump's narrative of success.
He suspended all travel from China. That decision alone by President Trump bought us invaluable time.
Another big issue brought up, important to Catholics, the right to life.
I couldn't be more proud to serve as vice president to a president who stands without apology for the sanctity of human life. I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it.
And I will always fight for a woman's right to make a decision about her own body. It should be her decision and not that of Donald Trump and the vice president, Michael Pence.
The candidates also made clear their differences when it comes to the environment. While during the presidential debate, Joe Biden said he doesn't support the Green New Deal, his campaign website calls it crucial for meeting the climate challenges we face. The Trump-Pence ticket is clearly against it.
We've made great progress reducing CO2 emissions through American innovation and the development of natural gas through fracking. We don't need a massive $2 trillion Green New Deal that would impose all new mandates on American businesses and American families.
And while Harris called for banning fracking as a presidential candidate, the Biden climate plan doesn't take that stance.
Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact. That is a fact. I will repeat that Joe Biden has been very clear that he thinks about growing jobs, and part of those jobs that will be created by Joe Biden are going to be about clean energy and renewable energy.
It was a much more civil affair last night. While the candidates did get long-winded and talked past their allotted time, they didn't interrupt as much as their running mates did and actually covered a lot of issues. St. John's political science professor Brian Brown is here now to break it all down for us. So Brian, coming off of last week's presidential debate debacle, how do you think last night went? Do you think the moderator did a better job, or do you just think it's the personality of the debaters that made things go smoother?
I think we're making progress. It was a much better debate. It was easier to watch, more policy than personality, but still very scripted, a lot of dodging, weaving, evasive answers. But overall, it was a much better debate and a more informative debate as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. While a lot of the issues were discussed, it seemed both of the candidates weren't really answering the moderator's questions. They were just talking about what they wanted to talk about. They were asked about presidential disability because the presidential candidates are both in their 70s, but neither answered the question. Your thoughts on all of that?
Well, I think the moderator did a pretty good job. I do question the format. I understand, and I think they really made an attempt to stick to the 2 minutes of uninterrupted time for answers, but I think that kind of took away a little bit from the traditional back and forth and engagement that you see in a debate. Many times there was some evasiveness, there was pivoting, some of it sounded very scripted, but overall, nobody made any big mistakes, and they both did what they had to do.
All right, religion was a topic that they discussed when the issues of abortion and the Supreme Court were brought up. When the candidates were asked about President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett, Mike Pence had this to say.
And our hope is, in the hearing next week, unlike Justice Kavanaugh received with treatment from you and others, we hope she gets a fair hearing. And we particularly hope that we don't see the kind of attacks on her Christian faith that we saw before.
Harris responded by saying both she and Biden are people of faith and that it's insulting to suggest they would knock anyone for their faith. But we all remember Barrett's last confirmation hearing when she was asked about her faith. So what do you think will happen next week?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And I really noticed, Senator Harris shaking her head while Mike Pence was saying that. And I thought she missed an opportunity to really expand on that statement as being people of faith. And I thought that was a flaw on her part. I think next week, the hearings are scheduled. It seems that the Republicans have the votes and lined up. There'll probably be some attempts by the Democratic Party to delay it. But at this point, it seems like a foregone conclusion that she will move through the nomination process. How voters react to that, we'll find out come Election Day.
All right, and you know, for the most part, it seemed that Pence came across cool, calm, and collected, while Harris showed her emotions. At one point, she looked right in the camera while talking about health care and told the American people, you know, Trump is coming for you. Do you think each of their styles worked?
Well, they have two different and very unique styles. In fairness to Senator Harris, I think women are often held to a different standard, and particularly when it comes to politics. You know, I think she was very mindful not to be over assertive. Dare she get criticism for that? Although at times she did look a little frustrated. Mike Pence did talk beyond the established time and the rules and guidelines, and he seemed to get away with it as the night went on. But overall, I think that time that they were divided, it was almost equally at the end of 90 minutes. So no one really dominated one or the other. But again, two different styles, two different personalities, and two different choices for voters to make.
So really quickly, who do you think won?
I think the fly on Mike Pence's head got all the buzz, so it's certainly there. You know, I think as long as the conversation is about COVID-19, that the Biden-Harris ticket has an edge. And I think you saw that last night, just in the way the stage was set up, the plexiglass, the social distancing, the opening question. So I think as long as that is the main conversation, the Democrats have an edge.
All right, Brian Brown, political science professor at St. John's University. Thanks for being with us again.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
The campaigns of President Trump and Joe Biden have agreed to postpone their next debate. Both camps are asking the Commission on Presidential Debates to move the town hall style event from October 15th to the 22nd. This came after the president said he wouldn't take part in a virtual debate, still up in the air when a third and final face-to-face will take place. President Trump is working inside the Oval Office again, but he stepped outside yesterday to call his coronavirus diagnosis a blessing from God and Regeneron's antibody cocktail a possible cure.
This was a blessing in disguise. I caught it. I heard about this drug. I said, let me take it. It was my suggestion. I said, let me take it. And it was incredible the way it worked. Incredible.
The president took a number of other treatments for the virus as well, but he says he believes that was the key. On the heels of the president's comments, the drug maker Regeneron announced that it submitted an application to the Food and Drug Administration for emergency approval of that experimental cocktail. If approved, the company says that access to the treatment would be limited at first, with only enough doses for 50,000 patients. The drug is currently still in clinical trials. Part of the drug comes from a human cell line once derived from fetal tissue. Meanwhile, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says Democrats will discuss the possibility that the president should be relieved of his duties because of his coronavirus diagnosis.
Tomorrow, come here tomorrow. We're going to be talking about the 25th Amendment, but not to take attention away from the subject we have now.
Pelosi made that comment while speaking about the stalled second coronavirus stimulus plan. The 25th Amendment could allow for the vice president to assume the duties of the president. Still to come on Currents News, one Brooklyn pastor looking to the heavens to help the Yankees pull off a win tonight. Plus, prayers were answered when a statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe is found a decade after it was thought to be lost forever. The Yankees need a win against Tampa Bay tonight to keep their World Series hopes alive. And one Brooklyn pastor says they could use a little help from above.
You know what? A prayer or two for the Yankees wouldn't hurt. Say your prayers. We need a little bit of energy here in New York, and we need a World Series.
Yes, go Yankees. And he didn't leave out the Mets. Monsignor David Casado says look out for next year. He thinks the Amazons are going to have an amazing season. And finally tonight, Catholics in Mexico received a sign of hope during the pandemic when a lost statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe was found. The statue was torn from its base during Hurricane Alex in 2010 and landed in the Santa Catarina River. It was buried too far under the riverbed to be retrieved. Then, 10 years later, this past July, after Hurricane Hannah swept through the area, the statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe was exposed in the river. It was recovered and is now being restored. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.